A Worm in the Apple, a story for adventurers interested in science. Leo made a big bet, a stack of big bets. His odds were long, and the probability of him pulling it off was lower than a worm's belly. Years of work lay ahead, and he knew it might come to nothing. But still, it was better than doing the same old projects like his friends. He had a brand new idea, a bold plan, and he was going for something on the edge of the impossible. Wormholes intrigued him. Although none had yet been discovered, they'd been predicted by Einstein's general theory of relativity, just like black holes. Because the universe folds and curves around itself like a mollusk's spirals, wormholes could connect its layers, most probably with a black hole on either end. Science fiction writers love the idea of wormholes for enabling storylines where heroes can cruise through enormous distances and millions of years. But Leo wasn't a storyteller, and at first he wasn't convinced studying wormholes would be worth his time. It's all theoretical and far away, he thought. Why bother? There were no black holes near our solar system, and no earthling could reach one in my lifetime, he thought. He was on the verge of giving up on wormholes when he came across a theory that brought him to the edge of his chair. It said wormholes had been formed when the universe was born. They didn't require a black hole to exist, but they were so tiny that no matter could move through them. Nothing could move through them. Leo asked himself, could tiny primordial black holes already exist here on Earth? What if they do? And what if they're stretching and growing under our feet as the universe expands? Since its expansion is increasing, could a hidden wormhole soon grow large enough for a black hole in another galaxy to connect to it? Could it surprise the world one day by opening and sucking in things and doing damage? Leo searched, but he couldn't find a single scientist studying the possibility of wormholes on Earth. If a hole did open up, an early warning might save a life, maybe save millions of lives. If a guy was looking for a project that would help him learn more science, what better goal could he have than saving lives? Leo committed to step up and take the lead. He studied for months, discussed ideas and practical problems with every physicist and cosmetologist he could find, and invited them to join in forming a wormhole defense league. He spent 3 more months drafting a design for a wormhole detector and looking for possible components. But before embarking on construction, he presented his plan to Pops, and he was glad he did. Pop's reaction was, "You sure are ambitious. Protecting people is an admirable goal, and your idea to look for disturbances in gravity to find them is reasonable. But your device would be bigger than a refrigerator. You need a truck to haul it around, and you couldn't reach remote locations like Mount Everest. You need hundreds of helpers and hundreds of refrigerators, a ton of money and years of work to cover the whole Earth. You'd be investing all that without knowing if anybody had ever been at risk from a wormhole." Pops continued, "Why not change to a simpler, more practical project? If you want to build a detector, why not just take a few months and build one that would have real practical value when it's done? For example, build a device that detects when a kid pees in a swimming pool and whacks his butt with an electric shock." Leo said with a smile, "a good reason to burn a kid's butt. I'll start that project as soon as this one's done. But Pops, for now, could you just help me miniaturize my detector?" "You know," Pops replied, "I've been looking for a reason to test the experimental quantum computers at IBM and Google. They're developing them right now. Miniaturizing your detector would be a worthy test for a computer that's 1,000,000,000,000 times faster than today's supercomputers." Pops walked away, stroking his chin with a faraway look in his eyes. Then, only 7 days later, Pops called Leo into his office at the observatory and gave him a blueprint for building a handheld wormhole detector. "You'll see I and the quantum computers agree. A GPS would be a better way to measure altitude than an airplane's altimeter like you have. Those things are fine for their purpose, but subject to slight misreadings caused by weather. A 6-satellite GPS would be both smaller and more precise to measure the strength of gravity. We recommend replacing your scale with a gravimeter with quartz zero-length springs and adjusting its readings based on variations in the Earth's crust, such as oil fields and dense rock formations. Then Pops drew a chart on Leo's workbench. Leo talked it through with Pops, and he was pleased with the improvements to his design. And after commandeering his mom's work table, he started building his miniaturized detector that night. He stopped watching TV, spent less time goofing off with friends, and was rewarded with good progress. Finding tiny components, connecting and testing them with a microprocessor took weeks, but coding and validating the software took months. Once, during a break in his after-school kung fu class, Leo mentioned his detector to a kid named Graham. That kid didn't seem particularly interested then, but when Leo showed him a rough prototype the next week, Graham reacted with enthusiasm. He said, "Hey, let's collaborate. I have a plan for sending messages back from a black hole. Maybe we'll find synergy between our projects." When Leo later learned that Graham had never heard of Stephen Hawking's black hole radiation, well, then he became skeptical that Graham's plan had much of a chance of becoming reality. Leo finally put down his screwdriver and soldering iron and declared his program code was solid. With the detector now ready to test, he showed the 4-centimeter diameter, 20-centimeter long, 400-gram cylinder to Pops. Pops was impressed, and his brother Rookie, who was there, well, he joked that it looked like a big, shiny silver cigar. A recessed switch turned it on, and after it warmed up, a pinhead LED showed that it had entered wormhole search mode. It then continually measured its altitude and gravity's pull. It operated silently unless the gravity reading didn't match Leo's prediction. If the deviation was greater than 0.010%, the detector labeled the location the possible home of a small wormhole, and it displayed a message on its LED panel, and it sent details to his home PC. If the deviation was more than 0.05%, the detector extended its scan to measure the size and shape of the wormhole's potential event horizon, and it noted it should be monitored. If the deviation exceeded 0.1%, well, it would sound an alarm to evacuate the area because a wormhole could open up at any time, and it would also send all the details to Pop's computing cloud in case the detector itself should be sucked into the wormhole. Leo asked Pops to help him test it by driving him up and down mountains and taking him down in an elevator shaft into a salt mine. When the detector worked well everywhere, he said, "I guess the next step is to find places that hint that they could be home to a primordial wormhole. Do you have any ideas, Pops?" Pops replied, "The only place that comes to my mind is Taos, New Mexico. People have been hearing this low-level buzz there for years, and nobody can explain it." Leo said, "Cool. Hey, but when can we head out?" Pops replied, "I'm afraid I'm too busy just now, but maybe Uncle Amerigo and Aunt Lolabelle would take you." When Leo mentioned his upcoming trip at their kung fu class, Graham surprised him by asking, "Could I go with you? I'd love to be there if it registers a blip, and there's a man interested in my invention. If you detect a possible wormhole, he might invest some money with me." The next morning, the doorbell rang as Leo was putting on his Red Sox baseball cap. That was the one he always wore when traveling. And there at the door were Uncle Amerigo and Aunt Lolabelle, dressed in black from head to toe. They whisked him to Graham's car in their black sedan with big fins, and then drove to a private hangar at the airport where they boarded a sleek black jet. It took off like a rocket, and landed at a deserted airstrip in the scrublands near Taos. The four descended the jet's gangway, and Leo immediately checked his detector. But the reading was disappointingly normal. A jeep was delivered, and Amerigo and Lolabelle drove the two boys to several other locations. Well, the nearby prairie and hills gave only normal readings too. But that changed when Leo took a measurement in an old gold mine in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Yay, 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 he exclaimed when he saw the detector's first reading other than normal. The gold mine's gravity was 0.015% lower than expected. He was excited, but he was calm compared to Graham, who hopped up and down and dug up a big stone to take home as a souvenir. Uncle Amerigo and Aunt Lolabelle nodded and smiled at the small deviation from normal. And back at home that evening, Leo described what he'd found. And Pop said, "Hey, that's promising for your detector. But I gotta say, it's worrisome. If it turns out that there are primordial wormholes right here on Earth, I wonder if that reading is a small error or if it's the real deal. You need another good place to test." Leo's mom was at her desk, and she overheard their conversation and called out, "Hey, when I was growing up in New York City, I learned of a spot the early settlers called Spuyten-Duyvil. That was Dutch for spitting devil. It's where the Harlem River meets the Hudson River, and water would occasionally spout up into the air for no apparent reason. Maybe that's a sign of a wormhole, occasionally spouting into the air, opening and closing quickly." Leo was intrigued, and he couldn't wait to take a reading there. That evening he called Uncle Amerigo and Aunt Lolabelle and asked if they would take Graham and him to New York City. He also mentioned that Graham had asked if a billionaire friend of his named Mr. Johnston could join them. Amerigo and Lolabelle picked them up right there, and the next morning they loaded their black car into the cargo hold of a large black jet. They flew to New York and drove to a riverside park where Mr. Johnstone was to meet them. Amerigo said he and Lolabelle needed to run an errand in the city. They'd be back soon.